Hey, today is the 13th of October, and I have the good thing to be able to talk to a past colleague of mine, Warren Tomkiewicz, who's now living in Salida, Colorado. So, Warren, what we usually do in this interview is to start off with the question of when did you first come, to Plymouth as a faculty member, and when did you leave, and what was your position when you first came?
Right. Well, it's interesting. I came as a student, first of all, in 1962, when it was Plymouth Teachers College. And I spent 4 years there, got a degree in my bachelor's degree in biology. And then I returned 22 years later, or 26 years later, in 1988 as a faculty member. Sort of replacing Mark Sylvester as a science educator there and teaching some earth science and biology and physical science to elementary and middle school potential teachers.
And when did your tenure at Plymouth end?
It ended in, January 2014, 26. So I was there for 26 years as a faculty member.
That magic number 26 between the time you were a student.
Yeah, right.
So the other question that we typically ask is, what was your impression of Plymouth when you came to it? But in this case, how did your impression of Plymouth change from the time that you were a student when you came back to be a faculty member? In terms of impression of both the town and of the school.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure the town changed an awful lot, at least that I could see. There were things that changed, businesses downtown and whatever, and the population may have grown a little in Plymouth, the town. I know I was trying to remember what the population was of PTC when I got there, and it sort of, I think, was just under 1,000 students at the time.
That sounds right, because
as a faculty member, it was more than double that.
Yeah, because when I came in '67, it was about 1,500. So
yeah,
that's probably about right.
Yeah, and what was interesting was it was Plymouth Teachers College in 1962. Went home for summer vacation after the spring semester in 1963. And when we came back in September, it was Plymouth State College with no discussion of students. I never heard a faculty member talk about it. And the only reason we knew it changed was the signs on campus were changed from PTC to PSC. Now, when we made the transition to PSU, there was a great deal of discussion with faculty and administration. And I think that was in 2003 or 4. And there was a big change in the input.
You know the story behind that. Wharton went to England and found out that colleges in England sometimes were high schools. And so when he came back, he said, if we want to have an international reputation, we've got to be a university and not a college.
Yeah. Well, to me, that was a big change in the input from students and faculty compared to the old days.
Right.
Sort of when I was a student there wasn't much input from students as to what was going on.
Now, were anybody, when you were here in '62, when you came back, was anybody still here when you came back that was on the faculty when you were a student?
Yes, which was very interesting. Al Davis, Quan Chung was here.
Right.
Larry Cushman.
Okay, right.
I'm trying to think of who else. There were a couple of other faculty that were still there, which,
Maybe Dave Switzer might have been still there, I think.
who, excuse me?
Dave Switzer.
Yeah, Dave was there. Yeah, Dave was a young man when I was there
Right.
as a student. Yeah, along with Quan. He was just a young guy.
Right. And I'm not sure when Mark Wells Sterling might have come in 64 or 65. So I'm not sure if he was there. Well, the other question we often ask is that when you came, was there anybody that mentored you, to sort of assist you in your transition from where you had been before to being at Plymouth?
Well, yeah, I mean, there were a number of people that, I became friendly with during the first couple of years that sort of gave me some guidance as to how the college was ran and stuff, including yourself. I have to include you.
Right.
And others in science like Al Davis, and I worked a lot with Dick Evans over in mathematics, and Kate Donahue in social sciences, and Cynthia Vasic, even Larry, Cushman, because he was there when I was a student as well. He actually asked the toughest question when I was interviewing as a faculty member as to why I'd want to come back to Plymouth.
And how did you answer that?
Well, it just seemed like it certainly was a better position than what I had at University of Maine, which was they were not very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized after 3 years there that that was not where my future was going to be.
Well, I think you were here. We always talk about the golden age of Plymouth, that we had moved from the Harold Hyde administration into a bunch of presidents that were much more, I guess, gave the faculty much more freedom in terms of figure out their future. Yeah. So what was your impression of students when you came, in the 80s? Had it changed from what you remember of being a student?
Well, it was very interesting. When I came as a student, the majority of students at that time, I was from Massachusetts, and the majority of students were from New Hampshire, and I was thinking they were a bunch of kids from, small rural high schools, and what did they know?
Right.
I was from a larger city high school, and I quickly realized that my new friends had a better learning experience than I did.
Mm.
I realized that my high school education was not that great.
Mm.
And even though they touted themselves as a good science math school, I didn't have as much math as the majority of kids I was in class with. So my impression of the students at Plymouth changed a great deal. Now, at that time, and for quite a while, I think, the vast majority of kids had to be from New Hampshire. And I think that changed while I was there. It was no longer 80-20 or 70-30 to more 50-50 and stuff like that.
Right.
So where the students came from changed quite a bit over my tenure there. And I don't know whether they were any better or not. It's hard for me to judge that. I thought we got some really excellent students coming to Plymouth.
Now, I assume have you kept in contact with some of the students that you've had?
Oh, yeah.
What are they doing?
I still get emails. And up until recently, there was a bunch of guys that we would go camping together out here, go to Yellowstone. I've gone to Zion and the Grand Canyon with 4 or 5 of my former students, advisees. I've had students, come and visit with their boyfriends and girlfriends.
I mean, that's always one of the positive things about being, in college teaching is the relationship that you have with your students.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit different than what you might have in, let's say, with high school,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, here's another interesting question. You were on the campus when it was fairly limited as a campus. And when you came back, of course, we had Boyd Hall. And I'm not sure, how much did you see the campus changing in terms of its configuration from when you were a student and when you were a faculty member and even when you retired, what the campus was like at that time?
Yeah. Well, I think there were, there were a lot of major changes. Like you said, when I was there, the Boyd Hall location was a tennis court and a softball field. When I came back, of course, to Boyd, and then, of course, the renovation and increase in size of Boyd Hall while I was there. So in terms of where I was located, there was some really major changes that went on there. I mean, same thing with the library. I remember I was there when the library was on the main floor there of
Hall Dorm, right?
Hall Dorm. Yeah. And as students, anytime we crossed Highland Avenue, we had to grab a box of books from Hall and carry them across. That's how they moved the library.
Oh, no kidding. I didn't hear that. I never heard that story. So that's
as a student,
that's interesting.
Go across Highland Avenue empty-handed.
That's interesting. Well, now the other question sort of that I have is that you went through a transition because you probably came in, I think, when we were natural science department.
Right.
And you left when we were multiple departments. And what was your impression about that change?
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things that attracted me to Plymouth was I always respected the concept of a natural science department. And I think for the first few years, at least, we worked pretty well together. And then there were some divisions that started and we sort of went separate ways. I know that you guys in biology, created your own department. And then what was left was everybody else in chemistry, earth, and physical sciences and atmospheric, the meteorology gang. And we formed that other department abbreviated as SEEPS, which I ultimately became chair of. But I just thought some of those divisions took away from what I thought was a strong point of PSC. Of course, it's all worked out. I guess everybody has found their niche there and their strengths, and so it did work out. But that was That was maybe I would say intellectually concerning to me while I was there as a faculty.
Right. Well, it's interesting, Warren, now that we have clusters, essentially the natural science would have been a good cluster.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of crazy. What kind of relationships did you have in terms of with administration? I mean, you went through a couple of different presidents and a couple of different deans, and
Yeah.
we had a provost when you left or not, but what was your relationship with those people?
Well, no matter who the administration was, they were very supportive. I have to say that. That's one of the things that I enjoyed and I found as a strength at Plymouth. I mean, I think initially when I got there, I think it was a bit freewheeling. If you needed funding, you could go in and whoever was in charge of finances would open his drawer and give you a handful of money. Those kind of things, accountability and everything sort of changed. But I always found the administration to be very supportive. I was always writing some grant or another to the state or feds or whatever, and you needed administrative support. And I always got that. I always was supported, and I didn't need much release time other than what I might be doing in the summer related to the grant, if I got it. But the administration has always been very supportive of work that I did, which was unlike where I was before, where they were trying to stymie any research.
When I've been away, on sabbaticals and things like that, I've always talked to the people that, at Plymouth, the president was one phone call away. Whereas at these big institutions like, CU Boulder and you're about 5 or 6 telephone calls away from them.
Exactly.
So now, you and I have had a little bit different experience at Plymouth because we've both taken some students abroad for a semester. So how did you look at that, both from your perspective and from the perspective of the students in terms of the situation of being there in Italy for that?
Yeah. Well, I have to say right off, it was the administration that encouraged me to do that. They had got some input from the St. John's University, where we were in Torino, to bring over a group of students in environmental that were ecological or environmentally oriented. And because we had the department then, environmental science and policy, the president and the provost, Julie Bernier, I think at the time, really encouraged me to submit a proposal to take, we took 15 students there for a semester. And they encouraged that and supported it and gave me the time, to sort of doctor my schedule on campus so I could be away that semester. And they were very supportive of that. And of course, we got a lot of financing from St. John's University to bring over students, and they arranged, housing and transportation and all of that business. But all of the students, as far as I know, really enjoyed that experience, working over there in another culture and learning a little bit of Italian and working with a rural community and the historic preservation of one of their 1500-year castle that was built in the 1500s and making a community center. So the students benefited a great deal.
Now, yours were upper division students, right?
Yes, yeah.
But my experience was a little bit different because mine were all first-year students that hadn't had any experience at all. But
Yeah.
I know it was very sound experience for them to be in Ireland.
Yeah.
So have you ever heard back from any of those students that you took over to?
Oh, yeah. Some of those are students I hear from on a fairly regular basis. Okay. Yeah. And, yeah.
Now, what was, being a faculty member in the sciences and what have you, what was your relationship with the rest of the faculty of the college? I mean, you've mentioned a little bit that you've worked with some of the people like Dick Evans, and Vasic, and but what was the rest of your experience as a member of the faculty? I mean,
well, overall, I would say good. I mean, because I was in science education, I had to work closely with the education department. Unfortunately, we didn't really see eye to eye on the science requirements for elementary ed majors, even though we were recognized as having an excellent science program for elementary ed majors, and all of those elementary ed majors, even though they had to work hard, appreciated it once they got a job or once they went student teaching. And yet, members of the education department thought students had to work too hard. And so they used an excuse of going more liberal arts in the ed programs, which was a trend back 10, 15 years ago. And they let them just take general biology. Now, there's nothing wrong with general biology, but if that's your only science, then you're missing a lot of what a elementary teacher really needs as a background. And that's what happens. They defaulted to biology because they had biology in high school. They knew something about it. And, actually in their preparation, it was totally inappropriate. Spend a semester on cells and stuff if you're going to be a third grade teacher. And so my relationship professionally with some members of education went down the tubes, but, I was always close with Cynthia Vasic and others in that department. I worked a lot with the math people, the math and science. We wrote grants together to improve math and science education for teachers. And
so that must have been sort of in the beginning.
The science program started, and I was department chair. I made a point to work very closely with social sciences, especially geography, Brian Middlecoff and Kate Donahue and that group. We worked very closely because our majors took some of their courses, especially the GIS courses, which we required. And, and then socially, along with a whole bunch of other people, I worked with the faculty to get the faculty center established and all of that stuff.
Right. In a frost house and whatever.
Yeah.
Now, you were also probably during the time when science started STEM. I guess you didn't get STEM in the 60s, right? But by the time you were towards the end of your career, the STEM was the big thing.
Yeah.
And how do you see that working with respect to the high schools in New Hampshire? I mean, were you able to? I think you did some outreach with some of the teachers and things like that.
We did. Almost all through my stay there at Plymouth, there was state or federal money to work with teachers, high school or middle school science teachers, which I did. I mean, my first few years at Plymouth, I got all of the state money, which really upset a lot of people at other universities, especially at UNH.
Because they were Canadian.
Yeah. So the state kind of changed that with that kind of pressure. But I always had grant money for summer programs, which a lot of the science faculty participated in, and they got, salary for their input and whatever. And so that was a really creative part of what I did at Plymouth with local schools until the state decided that federal money that they got would be put into a general fund rather than money for math or for science or for reading. And they put it in a big pool, which made it much more difficult to get that money because schools in the 2000s, like 2010 and beyond, were really focusing on their student success in math and reading and writing. And science all of a sudden took a second seat, I mean, I work with the Concord schools to redo their whole science program, K-12, for 5 years, and then the money dried up.
Mm.
And I always felt bad about that I couldn't ask PSU faculty to work for free.
Right.
And there was no funding all of a sudden because the only funding was for, English literacy and stuff. And
I think that was a lot because people worried about kids being able to read.
Yeah. And so science went by the boards, and I always felt a little guilty. I know people realized what happened to the funding, but we couldn't support programs anymore. I mean, we had residential programs where teachers stayed on campus. We ate with the Gordon Conference people.
It's really a different experience for.
And that sort of ended. Sometime in the mid 2000s there, while I was there.
Well, here's another interesting question, and people probably don't know about the connection that we have with Mount Desert. But I know the Science Society many, many years, and you and a number of other faculty members and students, and I guess it was a Science Society, wasn't it? Sometime in the spring. Can you talk a little bit about that, kind of how that related to?
We had a Science Society, and it was open to basically anybody, really. And, we had a lot of students, 50, 60 kids join. And we wanted to do, in talking with other faculty, we decided we wanted to do something in, a weekend trip somewhere or whatever. And I had spent 10, 15 years on Mount Desert Island working in Acadia National Park and teaching and running an oceanography program. So I suggested, why don't we go camping there, in early May? And we did. And we did that for, I don't know how many years.
Like 5 or 6 at least?
At least. Oh, yeah, even more than that. And, we brought students, we brought faculty and their families. Sometimes we had 50, 60 people camping, And
sometimes too, that's so important because when a student looks back, they may have had a professor, they may have had a course, but that kind of experience really is far more.
Oh, yeah. So we took them on hikes that, I knew we could get everybody through, and always on the week. It was always on the weekend. And on Saturday night, we always had a lobster bake, either at the campsite
or at one of the lobster.
And so it was a lot of fun, with kids, and, you saw them in a different way. And some of these students, you didn't really know, they weren't your major.
Right.
They weren't your advisees, so you got to know some other people, and they got to know you and your families. My family always came along with everybody else's. And we had a good time.
Okay, we're about nearing the end of the 30 minutes, which we try to hold to. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to mention?
Let me see. I don't know, as far as changes, a major change for me came when some outside groups wanted students, they wanted to establish a center for the environment.
Right.
We didn't have an undergraduate program, and that's when the administration came to me and asked if I would be the founding chair of the environmental science and policy. And of course, in some of the courses I was teaching, they were strongly environmental oriented. And so I did a lot of homework as to what a program could look like, and offered that to the administration, which they thought was good. And it took off. That first semester I taught a course, there was like 15 people interested.
Mm.
And when I left, we had like 110, 120 majors.
Right.
And I'm not sure what the population is now with the cluster idea, but it was an interesting journey there for 6 or 7 years as I was department chair before I retired. And those students all got jobs, they all had the skills. And, I was going to conferences that dealt with, environmental science policy, environmental studies programs. And, I could say we had a very successful program going. And, we were able to hire a couple of really good people that was the last thing I did as chair before I retired. We
Hire some folks.
We hired we were able to get two faculty lines,
Right.
which, took some negotiating with the administration. Didn't make everybody happy on campus, but that's what we needed.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for being interviewed today. I'm going to stop the recording because I want to talk to you a little bit out of the recording. So,
can I give one
Sure.
crazy comment?
Sure.
I know it's one, it asks on the form anything humorous. Well, one thing I was thinking, back in the day in 1962 as an undergrad, you had to be personally interviewed face to face on campus, okay, of all students. I think they only wanted to take the good looking ones. I don't know. But anyway, I got snowed in Plymouth. Me and another friend came up, and we got snowed in, and the college took care of us because we couldn't go home after the interview, right? I interviewed with John Foley. When I interviewed as a faculty member in 1988, February 88, I got snowed in. I got to the hotel up the road,
Right.
Highland Street there, and they sent Bob Fry to come and get me in his truck. And I was in the suit and my big galoshes. And they said, don't change, just wear your mittens and everything. We walked around town. So I thought that was a good omen, that I got snowed in both interviews of any consequence at Plymouth.
Well, that sounds like a good thing to stop on, and I'm going to stop the
Okay.
recording.